Derek Sheridan from Rust Belt Basketball Coaches Network. We are stoked. We have Jeff Shepard, who forged in not only high school basketball in the state of Indiana, but also college basketball as one of the premier shooters who has ever walked on either a high school court or a university level court. As a high school player, it was at Carmel High School, which is the 12th biggest school in the state of Indiana, to the university level at Huntington College, and set records that had only been set by our head coach, Steve Platt. I'm going to read you some stats. First team All-American, 96, 99. He started as a freshman. He was 96 through 99, 3 times All-Conference. And for those people who don't know, the MCC in NAIA basketball is the conference. The MCC used to be tabbed when Jeff played as NAIA's version of the Big Ten. So for a player to start as a freshman and earn these accolades in the MCC is ultra special. So we're talking about a special player. Led the team in scoring all 4 years in college, and in the MCC, that's a feat. He made 10 three-point shots in one game in the MCC. And that was a stat that Coach Platt, God rest his soul, called me and told me about, because I'd had a player in that same time frame make 9 in one game as a high school coach. And I remember after the game, I pulled him aside and said, if you would have made one more, your nickname would have been Shep. I could go on and on and on. All conference, all American. And most people who know Jeff know these statistics. They are unreal. Coach Platt called Brandon Murphy and I into his office one day, and we affectionately referred to Brandon as Brando. And he said, "Hey, I got a deal breaker coming in on campus, and I want you two to show him around campus, take him to lunch, whatever. But this guy's a deal breaker." I said, "Okay, who is he?" He goes, "He's a shepherd." Well, we jumped on that quick, and so Brando and I took Jeff into the gym, wasn't anybody else around, and we just wanted to shoot around a little bit and talk, shoot the bull. We walked in, got a couple basketballs out, and Brando threw a basketball to Jeff. Now, he is stone cold, and he just got done eating campus food, and he started shooting, and we had like 15 minutes before we had to get him over to the business building where he was going to meet his future professors. Well, he never missed a shot. So Brando and I are like worked up in a sweat because we're fighting on who can get the ball out of the net the fastest to throw it back to Jeff. So when we took him to the business complex, we both looked like we had been building something, which we had not. We were just fighting over who got Jeff's rebound. I'm going to turn this over now to Jeff Shepard, and he's going to talk to us about his journey from Carmel to Huntington College. And lastly, Jeff's going to talk about how to build your shot. So, Jeff, they're all yours, my man.
Well, thank you, Derek, for the history. It's always good to be in touch with former teammates like yourself. I know we got to play 1 year together, but that 1 year was incredible. And the confidence that you and Brandon and Mike McFarland, some of the other, upperclassmen at that time, really making us feel welcome as freshmen coming on campus. There's a lot going on in 18, 19-year-old's life. And to have great friends and teammates just makes everything worthwhile. So thankful for you and all that you did for me and for all of those, that played for Coach Platt during the time that we were there. But, you would also come to practices, you would be around the team, always made your presence known. And I'll never forget those times. Those were definitely the glory days. Incredible. Yeah. So, Derek, you want me to start with maybe just a little bit about high school?
You got to play against the best of the best every Friday and Saturday.
Yes. We were single class all the way through my high school, and it was the next year where it went to class basketball. So 96, 97 is when it went to class. So I was fortunate enough to still be in the single class through my 3 years at Carmel. And I think, Derek, kind of maybe just to start with the journey, and you mentioned the family name, and it's really neat to look back and see where Carmel is today, and really understand where it was when my grandfather came to Carmel in the early 50s to be the basketball coach and the athletic director. He was actually, my grandfather was an Indiana All-Star, played in Mitchell, Indiana, and played for Tony Hinkle at Butler. And his first high school job was at Mitchell. And then his cousins were in the construction business from Columbus, Indiana, and they were building the arena for Carmel High School. And they had shared with my grandfather that he had to drive north and take a look at what they were doing at Carmel and the growth that they thought they may be experiencing. And, hey, they were going to be hosting the sectional every year, which was a big deal if you were a high school coach in Indiana. So my grandfather, that it was huge, right? I mean, just to be able to know that you're hosting the sectional. Well, the teams that he had early in his career, I mean, he was really trying to develop a system. The Carmel Dads Club, which is a tremendous feeder program, he was creating that along with a couple of other men in the community. So, anything worth building takes time. You think of John Wooden and how long it took for him to win his first national championship. Well, my dad was a sophomore in 1966. So my grandfather got to Carmel in 58. He had been there 8 years, had not won a sectional. And the biggest rivalry for us growing up was Noblesville. And Noblesville had been winning a lot of sectionals. They were, kind of considered a basketball power, at least, kind of in this area. And my dad hit a game winner from the baseline to beat Noblesville. And it was the first sectional for Carmel in a very, very long time. Probably saved my grandfather's job. And it was 2 years later, my dad is Mr. Basketball in Indiana, led the state for 2 straight years in scoring over 38 a game as both a junior and a senior. He had 70 points in a game against Brownsburg, which probably was, the game that allowed him to win Mr. Basketball. He was in Faces in the Crowd, Faces in the Crowd that Sports Illustrated used to feature with high school kids across the country. So, my dad is a Mr. Basketball in 68. He ends up going to Butler to play for Tony Hinkle. And then 2 years later, my Uncle Dave is Mr. Basketball. So, in the span of from 66 to 70, Carmel wins their first sectional and they have 2 Mr. Basketballs. And it's just, it's such an incredible history when you consider, small school back then. Carmel was a small school, relatively unknown. Again, hadn't won a sectional in years. And then in that 4-year span, they, win a sectional, end up going to the state final game in 1970 when my Uncle Dave was playing, and have 2 Mr. Basketballs. Just incredible. And my grandfather ended up retiring from coaching after that season in 1970, passing the torch over to Eric Clark, who had been a longtime assistant. And then Carmel wins their first state championship 7 years later in 1977. And then Carmel didn't win another state championship in basketball till the year 2012. And again, you're in class basketball now, largest class, but it was that many years before Carmel won another state championship. So, that I grew up, that's what I'm growing up around. I was born in 1976. So all I have are the memories and the newspaper clippings and walking into Carmel High School and seeing my dad's picture and my grandpa's picture and my uncle's picture, just truly, growing up in basketball heaven. All I knew was Carmel basketball. It's all I wanted to do was run out of that tunnel to the band playing our fight song. And I dreamed of that every day. So my journey was, an interesting one because I was a late bloomer. So like a lot of kids, I didn't mature really until around my freshman year of high school. So always, kind of worked on my game, loved the game, was in the gym. I had an older brother, Scott. He was 3 years older, actually 4 years older. He ended up being an Indiana All-Star, played at Florida State. he and I, just growing up together, we'd be in the gym all the time. I learned so much from him, and just playing against him, and he matured early, and really had an impact from an AAU perspective in middle school. Started as a freshman at Carmel. We had Dean Smith in our home. We had all of these coaches. I mean, he had offers everywhere. Chose to go to Florida State just for style of play. Fell in love with the school. So just kind of growing up and being around all of that was an incredible opportunity. So for me, again, late bloomer. I was probably started in middle school, but I was maybe third or fourth best player on the team up until really around my freshman year. I started to get better, and then sophomore year we have 5 seniors starting that year. I'm the first guard off the bench, and I break my foot in our first game against Brebeuf, and I miss several games. I come back, we're playing Connorsville, I break my thumb, and I basically missed that entire year. So I didn't play but maybe a handful of minutes my sophomore year at Carmel. But we graduated 5 seniors. We made it to the state finals, Final Four at the Hoosier Dome. Incredible experience, being able to run out of that tunnel to play in that game. We lost to Ben Davis in the morning game. They ended up winning the state championship that year in '93. But incredible, right? Kind of what you dream of. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make much of an impact on the floor, but sitting on that bench every day, truly understanding what it means to be a Carmel Greyhound, and having 5 seniors lead us and show us what it takes to be a great player, to be a great person, to be a great teammate. You just learn so much, and you appreciate, especially now looking back, you appreciate so much, those experiences, and the opportunity that I had to sit the bench and to be in between Bob Hetty, who was my head coach, who's a Hall of Famer, incredible coach, and his son, Scott Hetty. So Scott Hetty was our assistant coach. So I give my dad a lot of credit. My dad said, hey, if you're hurt and you can't play, ask the coaches if you can sit between them during the game. And so I got to sit between Coach Hetty, Bob Hetty, and Scott Hetty. Scott Hetty's now leading Marian University, won 2 state championships at Carmel. Incredible basketball minds, Hall of Famers. Having that opportunity in my sophomore year to sit there and learn from them was invaluable. So kind of moving into my junior year at Carmel, I had a pretty good year. Again, I guess I would say I was becoming a better shooter. I was a very willing facilitator. So my family at times were like, I think we need to do a DNA test, because I'm not sure this kid is really a shepherd. I mean, he's passing up open shots to get somebody else a better shot. He's actually trying to get in a stance on defense. Like, who is this kid, right? I mean, this can't be a shepherd. So anyways, I was learning how to play. I was learning how to play in a system. And I had a pretty good year as a junior, averaged 14 points a game. We lost in sectionals, unfortunately. But going into that summer, again, as a sophomore, I was watching and learning. As a junior, I played all the minutes, again, was involved, from start to finish in all these games. I go into my junior year, summer of my junior year, and have a fantastic AAU and camp summer. I'm going to 5-star camp, make the all-star team at the 5-star camp. I go to the Dave Kreider All-American camp, make the all-star team at the Dave Kreider All-American camp. Played with a guy by the name of Kevin Garnett at that camp. And so I'm really growing into a player. I know how to play. I can handle the ball pretty well. I can shoot the ball really well. A lot of confidence. And as a result of that summer, I had a lot of Division I opportunities that came in. Smaller schools, so Stetson, Florida International, East Carolina, Youngstown State, those 4 were probably the heaviest. I had some hits from Indiana State and Ball State. But ultimately, for me, I'd seen my brother go to Florida. The fact that we couldn't watch him play, other than what may be on TV from time to time, a big ESPN game that Dick Vitale would be doing, but didn't really get an opportunity to see him play. And then I look at the competition, right? So he's backing up Sam Cassell and Charlie Ward, and then they're bringing in guys behind them that are McDonald's All-Americans. And I know, hey, I'm a 5'11" shooter. I need to be in the right system, small D1, maybe like you said, play some zone. Your height doesn't hurt you as much. Maybe the style of play is more get up and down the floor. Let's let it fly with the shot clock. I thought I could have a real impact, positive impact in college. But ultimately, I wanted to play at Butler. My dad had played there. My mom was a cheerleader at Butler. That's where my mom and dad met each other. My grandfather played there. I grew up in Hinkle Fieldhouse. So I wanted to play at Butler. And the Butler opportunity never came. And so going into my senior year, I decided I'm just going to wait. I don't want to sign anywhere. I want to have a great senior year, see where the dust settles, and I'll figure out my college situation, kind of throughout the season, maybe before, but I'm okay, throughout the season. Back then, 94, 95, colleges were still recruiting you at your high school games. Whereas today, the majority of that recruiting is happening in the spring and the summer with your AAU teams. So, again, it was a little different. They would come to practices, they would come to games, they would stay after games. Some schools still do that, right? But a lot of these kids are really being heavily recruited in the AAU scene, which makes sense. More national, there's more games now. It's AAU is very different than it was when we were playing. So going into my senior year, we had a move in from Texas, a guy by the name of Mike Wozniak. Look him up. He was a heck of a basketball player. Mike Wozniak went on. He was a junior my senior year. He and I both averaged around the same points per game that year, my senior year, but he went on to become the all-time leading scorer at Cal Poly. So D1 school, incredible conference. He went on to be their all-time leading scorer. So Mike Wozniak moves into Carmel. I get to know Mike, but what really changed with my game with Mike coming in is Mike was a shoot first, shoot second point guard. So the ball was in his hand and he was looking to get to the basket, looking to get his shot, which was great, right? I mean, I never really played with a point guard that was that dynamic offensively. But as a shooter, who's running off screens and really understanding how to move off the ball to get open and get shots, it was difficult for me to get in the flow because I wasn't getting a lot of shots with Mike running the offense. So again, great teammate, but I had to learn a kind of a new style, how to play, how to get open, maybe get on the ball a little bit more. I'd start bringing the ball up a little bit more, just to have the ball in my hands. But great learning experience, an important thing. But what happened then that senior year is where I felt like I would be featured, probably be scoring a lot of points. We'd be winning a lot of games. I was averaging around the same as I did as a junior, about 14 a game. And so it wasn't until probably 5 games left in the regular season of my senior year where Mike and I and the rest of the group really started to gel. And he became more willing to give the ball up, trusting me as a shooter and a scorer. And so I ended up averaging about 24 a game over my last 5 games in high school. Excuse me, which included hitting the game winner in sectionals to beat Hamilton Southeastern. So that was huge for my confidence. I think I had 28 in that game. That was the most I ever scored in a high school game. But being able to win that sectional was truly incredible. So we lose in regionals, and I get invited to the top 40 workout at the time. I think they call it the top 60 workout now. But I go to the top 40 workout, and I didn't have any offers. So the top 40 workout took place the weekend when I was supposed to be getting home from spring break. And I remember going to Fort Myers, Florida with a group of friends for spring break, waking up every morning at 5:30, getting to the YMCA at 6 o'clock and working out from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock every morning so that I would be ready to play in this top 40 workout when I got home. And as a result of the top 40 workout, that is when Coach Steve Platt at Huntington, which I'll speak more about Coach Platt, that is when Steve Platt met my dad. I had a fantastic top 40 workout, and it was maybe 2 weeks later, the offer came in from Huntington, and I decided, again, I didn't really have any other options at that point. No small colleges had been recruiting me. So I felt like, hey, Huntington's probably the place to go. Maybe give it a year or two and see if I can go transfer out. Uh, excuse me. See if I can maybe transfer out and then go to a D1 school after that. So, Derek, that's a little bit about the high school journey and kind of how Huntington was, in the mix from a recruiting standpoint.
One of the things that I want to make sure everybody knows without any uncertainty is Jeff's high school career was predicated on playing not only the biggest schools in Indiana,
Newcastle, Chrysler Arena, the
right.
Wigwam, didn't play at Marion, didn't play at Muncie Central, but, Carmel seated 4,500. It was packed every night.
Right.
I don't know why it's not packed every night anymore, but everywhere we went, these schools were big schools. They loved basketball. Again, back in that single class, it was just different, right? The band was always at the game. Student body was always there. It was, the student bodies from both sides, they traveled. Right. So, just an incredible time of life, to be able to be at the center of it all in Indiana high school basketball, competing at a very high level.
Did you get to play in a Memorial Gymnasium in Kokomo?
Sure did. Yeah, yes, got to play there. Incredible experience.
That's who hosted our sectional when I was a high school athlete.
Enjoyed playing there too because, Basil played that 2-3. So I was able to kind of get myself open. And junior and senior year, I had some big games against Kokomo. Yeah, it was amazing. You think about, I know we'll get into the college piece, but the defenses that I would see, it was incredible. Every night, and there were no surprises after about halfway through freshman year, that I was scoring and people were screening for me and looking for me. And that's, when I think about my college experience and scored a lot of points and all that, which is great. But the only reason that I scored any points was because of incredible teammates and an incredible coach who defined roles.
Yes.
Who really understood how to get the most out of everybody that was on the floor, whether they would score a point or not. It didn't matter. It was all about, can we win this game? And are we going to put ourselves in a position to be successful? So, it's great. Like I hear, man, lead the conference in scoring all those years. And it was incredible. And the defenses that I was seeing were, if you look at it now, impossible. If you don't have willing screeners, willing passers, patience, you can't score like that, and in today's game, it's not, everyone is kind of equal. And I think it's, it's unfortunate really when everyone's created equal, because the reality is, if I was created equal, I would have to come on. I'd have, the ball would have to be the ball would have to be moved 2 or 3 different times for me to get open again. Right. I would have never scored any points if I was playing in a system where it was equal.
One of the things I loved about Coach Platt was offense was not equal opportunity. The best player got the ball. And before you, it was Lance Stockler.
Yes.
One of the coaching points I took from Coach Platt, that if I was still able to coach, I would carry this on. Coach Platt never, ever wanted to set a staggered screen for you, because he knew the tailpipe or the last screener or the screener closest to the ball would hedge that and make it hard for you to catch it. Everything you got, at least when I was there, was all off single screens, sat at the intersection of the high school volleyball baseline and sideline.
Well, and that's, Derek, I look at it and, you had to be, for me, I was 170 pounds in college, right? I had to be able to run 35-second shot clock, right? I was in peak conditioning. I mean, that was probably, when I look back, one of the biggest things that allowed my success, moving off the ball. I never stood still, but also I knew that I was going to get the screens and that I was going to get the ball, right? So there was more movement with purpose because those roles were defined. And I mean, you think about you setting those screens, Brando setting those screens my freshman year, and then I've got Ryan Ripke and Brody Garber and Gabe LaGrange, setting those screens for me for 3 more years. How we were just on the same page. I mean, I look at senior year, and again, box and ones, triangle and twos were the two regarding me. I mean, and still being able to have the ability to run off screens, rescreen, get the ball. I mean, I look at, if I look at highlights, every time I scored or hit a three was because of coming off of a screen or getting, a great pass from somebody. I mean, it was incredible. So you have all those great screeners. And then, I have a point guard for 4 years in Matt Eberly, who sets the all-time assists and steal records at Huntington over those 4 years. His willingness to pass, and the thing that people don't realize is he and I worked very closely on where I wanted the ball. And it wasn't just where in the pocket I wanted the ball, but it was the actual rotation of the seam, so that when I would catch the ball, I was ready. I didn't have to fix the seam before I went into my shot. And there's some video out of Jay Williams in the NBA who talked about his passing and him doing that. Eberly was probably one of the first guys well before his time that was thinking about those things. And again, to be a great shooter, and we'll talk a little bit about that, there's so much a shooter has to have supreme confidence. And I think the only way that you get that is when your coaches want you to shoot the ball and your teammates want you to shoot the ball. If you have your coaches and your teammates that want you to shoot the ball, unbelievable what you can accomplish if you're a pretty good shooter.
I can remember like it was yesterday, just the 5-on-0 work we did with Coach Platt. One of the genius things about him was we would go 5-on-0, but you would have a chaser. And he would say, Jeff's not allowed to curl. So we came up with a regimen where if we noticed the person guarding you would go over the top of my screens or Brando's screens or Brody, whoever, we would move our offense up above the lower aspect of our offense, above the old high school volleyball line, so you could fade that. You would put 2 hands over your head, football sign for a field goal when you faded. I took that from you into my coaching. So whenever one of my shooters faded, they had to make that sign. I would like to visit you sometime in a gym where you could make an instructional video. That is one of the lost art in the game of basketball. It's hard to screen a guy whose chaser is piggybacking. That's the worst type of screen.
Right. I mean, just a little separation. And I think the other thing, really developing that, I mean, that's something, again, a lot of kids don't develop. So understanding how to read screens, how to run off screens, how to communicate with screeners, and really have screeners that are screening, right? That they're not trying to just maybe move a defender off a little bit so they can go get the ball, but truly setting a screen to get a shooter a shot. And I watch this in youth basketball, and I look at this in high school basketball, and, there's some simple out of bounds plays to get a shooter a shot in the corner. And you can see kids that really want to get a shooter a shot or kids that really want to get their shot. And unfortunately, a lot of these kids that could be great screeners aren't, because they're selfish. They really don't want to free up a great shooter. I mean, it's amazing to see. I think the other thing from a screening standpoint that really helped me in college, and I learned this at Carmel, my brother really was the one that taught me this. My brother saw the toughest defenses from his freshman year of high school all the way until he graduated from Carmel, then goes to play in the ACC. But I learned how to take a physical defender and basically just turned them into a foul machine.
Yeah.
My ability to run off the ball
Yeah.
and to take that contact and to lift up an arm. I mean, that was probably, being able to get to the free throw line and being able to get a defender off me was probably a big reason too why I was effective on screens. Hey, I want you shooting that shot and I'm going to give you the right screen and yeah, let's get back. I mean, what else could you ask for, right? I mean, that's just it was a unique situation.
Brando wouldn't say let's get back. He would just yell conversion, convert. And that's what make basketball fun.
Well, and I think too, and you're right. And the reality is you were so much more than that. I mean, you were an incredible competitor. You scored the ball. You were an ultimate leader, taught us so much. So you were a lot more than just a screener trying to get me open. But what I find just so intriguing, right, when I think of all this and I watch basketball today, and I think this is why Ryan Ripke, he learned so much from you. And I see he's on tonight. And I think he always wanted the ball. And so he would set me really good screens, knowing that I'd probably get double teamed and then he'd be open. But you think about it, right? It's like the screener a lot of times is the one that's going to be open. And if you set a good screen, my goodness, right? The roll's open, the slip's open, especially if you're screening for a great shooter coming off the baseline. You have the ability to slip to the basket. Brody Garber lived for slipping screens on me and getting the ball and making things happen in college. I mean, Brody knew how to turn a screen into his offense as well. And let's be honest, I mean, and I'll share a little bit about my college journey, but I mean, I played with 3 guys that scored over 2,000 points in college.
Right.
So, I mean, guys know how to score, right?
Everything you said, other than me being a good player, I think is spot on. The rules and the ability Coach Platt had to clearly define rules was special. Ryan Ripke, I chuckle because a lot of people don't know this. When Paramount Films came out with Gladiator, they had Russell Crowe mimic Ryan Ripke. I mean, Ryan Ripke taught Russell Crowe how to be the Gladiator. And Ryan gets tired of me saying this, but from your time at Huntington College, at a small school, the biggest highlight out of season is open gym. You get to compete. Coach would bring other players in. We're all looking forward to 4:00 to open gym. Mm-hmm. Once you got picked, everybody, the other two people picking teams, the next person picked, no matter who else is on the floor, was Ryan Ripke, because they knew Ryan was going to play hard and compete and not have to sit out and watch. That's the biggest fear in open gym, right? Have to sit out.
Can't lose.
Right. I'm not friends with Russell Crowe, but I did get a nice card in the mail that said, "Hey, thank you for introducing me to Ryan Ripke."
I thought this podcast was supposed to be about Jeff Shepard.
It is. We're also talking about the people who made Jeff Shepard.
Exactly right.
I've heard there's a sequel to Gladiator coming out. I'm not being facetious. I have heard that. So Ryan, for your schedule, because Russell's going to be calling again.
Well, hey, I've been taking some notes. My first thing is, speaking of open gym, and Derek, you might have been there. This was in the spring of our freshman year. Jeff, do you remember that open gym when Coach Platt had some of the old timers come in?
Yes.
And just beat the snot out of us. Up. Talk trash. I mean, I think he went in there.
Hard fouls.
Yeah. And he said, be the biggest jerks you can be. And I don't think we realized it immediately, but I think maybe after open gym or whatever, talking in the locker room, whatever, I think we were going, you think Coach Platt set this up? But that's what he did. He set that up and he said, go in there and just knock these kids around.
Two of the guys who Coach Platt brought in to play against us were two of the guys I played against in high school. The first trip we had down the floor, Jeff stacked up directly underneath me. One of these gobshites that Coach Platt brought in was like, all he's going to do is screen. And I screened for Jeff. Jeff threw the ball after he had caught it with one hand over his head, and I caught it for a layup. One of these gobshites said, that might be the only 2 points you've ever scored on this floor. I said, yeah, but at least these 2 points count.
Yeah, but Derek, here's the thing that says a lot about you, because here, you were probably a 5th-year senior, right?
Yes.
Okay. And here you've got Brody Garber, Matt Eberly, and Jeff Shepard coming in, and you knew your role on the team.
Clearly.
But it was to make these 18-year-old kids' lives easier. And not everybody on that team was willing to do that, if you remember, but
I do.
That's what you were about. That's what you were about. We talk about wanting to win, and that was the thing that those Coach Platt teams, he got the guys he wanted.
Yes.
And when he went out recruiting, and when I coached with him, he taught me this. We don't promise these kids anything other than a chance to compete. And those kids that like to hear that, those are the ones we got. And so, you talk about roles, and you talk about the long string of first-team All-Americans and Conference Players of the Year that Huntington had. All those guys came in and had to earn their shots.
100% agree.
We've talked a lot about Jeff's ability to come off screens, but the one thing that I remember is his ability to V-cut and set defenders up, and talk about. And I don't think I'm exaggerating. I don't think I've seen defenses as scared of a player as I saw them as scared as they were of Jeff, because he V-cutted and he got himself into the lane before he came out on a down screen, and he was wide open because those guys were punching through that opposite block before Jeff even V-cut.
Well, and the reason that was so effective and why I was able to do that is because, again, I had chasers, right? So, I had guys guarding me, and to your point, Derek, their single job was do not let him catch the ball. Well, the advantage for me as the offensive player off the ball is that defender was not in a ball man defensive position ever.
Yep.
So that defender was all over me and never knew where the ball was, but I was smart enough to understand that I knew where it was and that he didn't know where it was. And so if I would fake like I'm running down the baseline right and I know the ball's coming opposite side,
yep,
I could misdirect that quickly because of the way they guarded me. And, again, it's just you kind of learn that from experience and understanding the game. And I don't think that stuff gets taught. It wasn't really taught to me. It was just kind of birthed,
right,
through I got to figure out ways to get open. And I know I've got great screeners. How do I do this? Right. And now as these defenses change, I think about how skinny, 170 pounds freshman year of college, how physical guys were. It was tough, but you learned so much through just some of that adversity. I remember we played Manchester College. They had just come off their Final Four run with Steve Alford. Our freshman year at our place, Brad Kanoy, Lafayette Jeff, is a senior All-American D3 guard, and he guards me that game. I score, I think, 7 points in that game, which was my college low, and I couldn't get open. We beat Manchester. That's right. We beat them. Brad Kanoy, and they had the Burt Paddock. I remember Brad Kanoy really held me down, and I learned a lot. Actually, it completely changed my training after going through that game.
I remember that game. The head coach at Manchester,
Dick Huntsacker.
Dick Hunt, thank you.
That's right.
He was Rick Majerus's assistant at Ball State. And he had been all over the place as a head coach. He came into our locker room after we beat Manchester, and he said, I hope you guys appreciate who's coaching you.
Mm-hmm. I remember that too.
Yes.
You've taken us through your high school career, and you've touched more on your college career. Take us through starting at Huntington and learning, the way around college, and take us through how you learned to play adult level, because NAIA basketball.
It's great basketball. I always tell people, if you've never seen an NAIA game, go to Indiana Wesleyan, go to Huntington, go to St. Francis, go to Marion, catch a game on a Tuesday or Wednesday night or a Saturday, and you will walk out of that arena with a real appreciation for what small college basketball is. I mean, the level is incredible, and
Yes.
even back from the time we were there to now, I mean, you look at the athletes, and you look at the style, and you look at the coaches in these conferences. I mean, it's the real deal. And I think what also people don't know, and I try to, communicate this at a very high level from an NAIA perspective, there is a lot of scholarship money available.
Yes.
Full ride scholarships available. So a lot of people don't recognize, they kind of think, well, is that D4? And it's like, well, let's talk about what NAIA actually is. And if you think about the state of Indiana, I think we've got 2 D2 schools in the state of Indiana. A lot of states have multiple D2 schools, but if you look at Indiana and you think about all these NAIA schools in the former MCC conference, now the Crossroads League, it's like, if you're an Indiana kid, it is very difficult to play in that conference. And what a privilege if you get an opportunity to play in that Crossroads League for 4 years, close to home. You've got the ability for family members and friends to come watch you play. Every game in that conference is a challenge, and you're playing against D1 kids every night. And you still have great fan support, great, school support. I mean, it's an incredible level. So I think about, and I know Nate Bordeaux's on here, and his father was a professor. One of the things when I look at Huntington, first of all, let me just I'm just going to give you a little bit of that journey. So coming there, freshman year, little bit of fish out of water, small school, go to, major school. Carmel now is actually the number 1 in size today in the state of Indiana, number 2 high school in size in the country. 5,600 kids, on pace to probably eclipse 6,000 when my son, gets to high school, which will only be in a couple of years. But going to Huntington really was all about Steve Platt. So for those listening, Steve Platt was probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest player to ever come out of the state of Indiana. He scored 3,700 points at Huntington, had an offer to play in the NBA, was a farmer at the time, had a family, so wanted to stay in Huntington and farm. And he was out of coaching for a long time. Well, when he came in to take over the program, I was fortunate enough to be part of his first recruiting class. So myself, Ryan Ripke, who's on the Zoom, Matt Eberly, Brody Garber, we were the 4 that were there from start to finish his first 4 years as a head coach at Huntington. And Steve Platt was not our friend. Incredible coach. And I hear about these things that Derek says about his job was to get me open. Well, I never knew that. Coach Platt never made me feel like you're the guy, you're taking the shots. If anything, he was probably harder on me than anybody, but it made me not only a better player, but a better person. So playing for him was incredible. His wife, Peggy, who is just lovely, incredible lady, their son and their daughter, incredible people. Coach Platt went on to be the all-time winningest head coach at Huntington University, and his son Ty is second in wins all-time at Huntington University. So incredible family legacy. When I think about the Shepherd family in Carmel, think about the Platt family in Huntington. And so playing for him was incredible. But I started with 2 other freshmen. There were 3 freshmen that started right out of the gate. And, we had some success, but we were really learning our way, figuring out, how do we build this program. We had great senior leadership in Derek and Brando, great guys to learn from, great guys that really just gave us the keys and said, hey, we're here to help you guys become as successful as you can be. The future is your future. So we, had a lot of success. I think in looking at our senior year, at that point in time, I think 23-10 was our final record. It was the most wins in school history from, I think you had to go back to the 70s. And it was the first time that Huntington had won a conference championship. Also, you have to go back to the 70s. That year, my senior year, when I was Conference Player of the Year and first team All-American, that was the first time that had happened since Steve Platt was a first team All-American. And then Ryan Ripke made mention of this, but we went 10 years from my senior year, 10 years forward, where we had an All-American at Huntington. And I want to say it was maybe the last 5 years of Steve Platt's coaching career at Huntington that Huntington had a higher winning percentage than any other team in the Midwest at all levels of basketball, men and women. It was an incredible time. Unfortunately for me, as I look at it, we win conference. Back then, there were 2 divisions in the NAIA. We had gotten ranked as high as 7 in the country. We are playing at St. Francis. I think it was our second to last conference game. Had to win that game to win conference. And that was a night in overtime that I broke my foot with 9 seconds left in the game. So we win that game, but we went from 7 in the rankings, and the next ranking came out. We had beat Goshen on senior night. We had lost to St. Francis in the first round of the conference tournament. We go from 7, I think, to 15 in the rankings, and we do not get an invite to the national tournament. I wouldn't have been able to play, but that would have been the first time that we got to the national tournament, again, in several years. So unfortunate, but the beautiful thing was, as I look at that, Derek, you think about Stockler and those guys when Coach Platt had his first year before he had recruits, and then your senior year, and you think about the progress and the trajectory of the program. We went on to be a national powerhouse for 10 years after I graduated. And it was so cool to be able to go back, and Ryan Ripke's an assistant coach, and I'm traveling to Branson, Missouri, to watch the national tournament and going to practices and being around the team. It was an incredible time of life, and I wasn't playing, but just, being around Coach Platt. And what's interesting is I mentioned Coach Platt, very hard to get to know. You never felt real comfortable with him. But the night that I broke my foot and I'm in the hospital, and he basically spent the night in the hospital with me there in Fort Wayne. The team went back to school. He went from coach to friend that night, and it was just incredible. The relationship that he and I had. I mean, I considered him a best friend from the time I graduated until the time he passed. He was the best. Simply the best.
He was a unique man. I didn't have much of a relationship with him until he found out I wanted to teach and coach. And then our relationship kind of ramped up. Well, it didn't it did. The thing about him that I'll never forget, a lot of things, your freshman year, I had to get into the gym 45 minutes before we actually started practice and ride an exercise bike so I could get all the scar tissue and both of my knees broke up, so I could go practice. If you remember the squad lines, stretching, we were all.
Oh, yeah.
And he would walk around during stretching and talk to us about what we were going to do that day in practice. And one day I was really struggling to get my left hamstring stretched out. And he walked by and he said, that left hammy is bothering you. I said, I'll get it worked out. Don't worry. I got it. Well, he walked over to another kid who didn't make it through our program and just went nuts on it. After that practice, he and I were at a different level. When I graduated, he called me and said, hey, there's a PE opening here and they need a 6th grade basketball coach. And I'm very good friends with a board member. I've already put a word in for you. And I got the job. As I escalated through my career, every move I made, Coach Platt had a significant role in that. Even in the state of Ohio, I know here in Maumee, when I interviewed for the Maumee job, the AD then said, if you played for Steve Platt, you know basketball. But he was a former guy. And there was a lot of truth in that. I think Steve Platt was synonymous with Don Meyer, Paul Patterson, Dick Bennett, these guys who took kids who weren't recruited heavily, but had a large amount of success with them.
Mm-hmm.
And you just don't see much of that anymore. I guess maybe you could say Greg Gard at Wisconsin. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Derek too, and I wanted to shout out Nate Bordeaux and his dad, but it was a special time just at the university. I mean, we didn't have football, so basketball was everything. And
yes,
to think about the community support when we started winning, to think about the student support. I mean, Platt Arena wasn't called that at the time, but it was absolutely home court advantage. It was rocking, and our fans traveled. And I'll never forget, I mean, after having a good game or getting a good win, in my college mailbox the next day would be a clipping of the article with a handwritten note from Professor Bordeaux or, from our president. And there was just such a uniqueness around Huntington University, a community of people that were for each other. And, you felt that way on campus. You felt that way in the classroom. Man, basketball was tough, right? I mean, going into that gym for a few hours a day and knowing what we had to go through, I mean, it was tough, but knowing that you had so much support, I mean, again, it was a dream come true. Like I look at that situation and I say to myself, man, if my kids could have a similar situation in college where they're developing in their faith, they're getting great coaching, great direction in their athletics, they have great support in people that want them to win in the classroom, and unbelievable friends that they'll have for the rest of their life. Like at the end of the day, that's Huntington University for me. And I've got 2 daughters there now, and it's very similar, kind of what they're experiencing at Huntington. Special place. And give Coach Platt all the credit. I mean, I don't think there would have been a chance that I went to Huntington University if it wasn't for Steve Platt. And then I look at my life from 1995 to today, and every good thing in my life, meeting my wife, coming to the Lord, serving at the university, being able to play basketball and build friendships, every good thing in my life is the result of the time that I spent at Huntington University. Incredible.
Professor Bordeaux was the first bastion of putting the newspaper article. That was a big thing. And when you came on, when your class came on campus, we were still fighting the battle of making Huntington College basketball legit. And what I mean by that is we had to fight for legitimacy, even amongst the professors, some of the professors, I should say. Your class put all of that to bed. It did. And that it was a really neat thing to be a part of that. The other thing I wanted to say is Coach Platt held you guys who started this winning in such high regards. It was special. And both Ryan and you and I have talked about this. Coach Platt was a hard nut to crack, but once you got acclimated with him and he got acclimated with you and that nut was cracked, there wasn't a more affectionate person I've ever met.
Yeah.
So tell us, Jeff, about what you did. What did you do to develop the shot you had that made you a legend?
Yeah. It started at a very early age, and I give my parents just a ton of credit for getting a ball in my hand early. I mean, again, our family was basketball, so I mean, it kind of went without saying, but for a kid, you got to make it fun. And so there was a ball in my hand from an early age, little hoops and mini balls. And I think one of the things kind of looking back is when my brother and I kind of got to an age where, my dad was like, all right, we want to start having a hoop at our house and we can shoot outside and, invite some neighbor kids over to play. He got, we were kind of the one house in the neighborhood that had the hoop that you could raise and lower. And my dad was not a great form shooter. So my dad, basically his shooting success came down to repetition. But my dad thumbed the ball and he had a side spin rotation. So you can imagine, right? If the ball hits the rim and it's on a side spin, probably not going to go in, right? So you have put yourself in a position where you have got to be really effective
Right. An earth
as
ball.
a shooter.
Right.
It was an earth ball. So, what my dad was really diligent with was, hey, go out and have fun, go dunk and shoot and do all these things and have fun. And we're going to invite older kids over and we're going to play. And that's how you're going to get better and stronger. And we're going to play against older kids. But when it's time to work on shooting, we are going to lower the hoop. We're going to put the girls' ball in your hand and we're going to shoot with the right form. And we're going to shoot shots that you can make. And so from a very early age, my mechanics were pretty solid. And, when you're young, you're smaller, you're not strong, you want to just force the ball up. And I remember being at, Carmel High School after games and having my basketball and just trying to shoot as hard as I could shoot. Again, having fun, right? I mean, I'm not training to be a basketball player per se. I'm having fun. I want to be around the game. I want the game to be fun. It's a game. But when it came time to train and we would work on the shot, we would do it right. And so I had the right mechanics in place at an early age that really helped me. And I remember, my dad had camps every summer. He would have guys come in and talk about shooting. And I remember the BEEF acronym, which was balance, eyes, elbow, follow through. And, you just hear these things and you see these things and you want to be the best player you can be. And so that, okay, if I want to be good in high school, I'm going to have to learn how to shoot the ball. And I'll never forget, I was a really good set shooter, probably all the way from like 4th grade to 8th grade. And I remember going into the gym with my dad and my uncle Steve. This was between my 8th and 9th grade year. And my uncle Steve said, now it's time for you to learn how to shoot a jump shot. You're strong enough, you're athletic enough, you need to learn how to shoot a jump shot. And I'll never forget at Carmel High School that night, sitting on the blocks and learning how to shoot a jump shot. Again, I'm summer of my 8th grade year, and I'm learning how to shoot a jump shot. And it's very different, right, than a set shot. And so I go into the gym and it's repetition, repetition, repetition. And they tell me, hey, nothing changes with your mechanics. You are now jumping. So you have to figure out where you need the ball in your pocket. You got to figure out where you're releasing the ball on your jump. And I remember the frustration of, man, I just had gotten to be a pretty good shooter. And now it's difficult to shoot this shot. And the further I move out, it's even more difficult. So a lot of time, spent on trying to perfect that. But if you look at my college career, I was a jump shooter. And a lot of people don't know that, right? I was getting up on my shot. Any picture that was ever pictured of me in a game, everything was a jump shot. And I had to at my size. I had to be able to raise up and get the ball up over, a bigger defender.
Is that the period of time where you developed that high shot pocket? You had the highest shot pocket of any premier shooter. Your shot pocket was higher.
Had to get that shot off. And so I think for me, that was, again, back to, I didn't really mature until sophomore year of high school. So I had to figure out ways to get my shot off. And that was hard. It's hard to get your shot off when you're smaller than everybody else. So I think that was part of, developing, was playing against bigger kids, stronger kids, and figuring out, hey, if I'm going to be on the floor, how am I going to impact the game? I can shoot the ball. I got to figure out how to be able to still shoot the ball when I'm undersized. And that's where a lot of that, development came in.
When you were at Carmel, were you coming off screens, or was it a penetration-based offense where the ball handler collected 2 defenders and kicked it to you?
Mix of both, right? I mean, it wasn't heavy coming off screens. It was more, dribble drives, defense help, some kicks, some off ball screens, kind of learning how to get my shot off the dribble. And that's really something that I had to develop going into college was, how do I free up some space to become a more effective shooter off the dribble, right? Off a shot fake or a catch and one dribble, get by. And I kept it simple. And I give my dad and my brother a lot of credit. This was, pre a kid having a trainer, going to the gym and literally spending hours working on your craft. And I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the process, figuring out how to do it. And for me, and I really try to instill this in my kids, is if you just watch some film and or watch basketball, right? Kids don't watch basketball as much as we did growing up, but what are the shots that you're going to get in the game? And instead of, hey, I got up or I made 200 threes today, or I shot 500 shots today, I don't care. I want to know, did you make 100 of the shots that you're going to get in the game?
Who did
because
you?
that is what matters at the end of all of that. It's not I can sit there and hit 15 in a row from 15 feet at the baseline, catch and shoot. Hey, that's good, right? Repetition, get as many shots. But when it comes down to really training and becoming an elite shooter, it's got to be game speed. It's got to be game action. It's got to reflect as much as it possibly can what a game is going to look like. Otherwise, you may get that 15-footer catch and shoot one time in a game.
Who did you emulate when you were a high school lad? What college did you emulate?
Man, it's a great question. I was a huge Loyola Marymount fan, watching Hank Gathers, Bo Kimball, the way they got up and down the floor. Bo Kimball was a phenomenal scorer, shooter. You had guys that I remember, Darren Archibald at Butler, one of the premier three-point shooters ever, sitting at Hinkle, on a dark, cold night and watching him, just unload for 8 threes in a game. I mean, I was always looking for, who are the guys that can shoot it at a high level. But that didn't really, and again, when I think about my high school career, I was much more of a facilitator, very willing passer, make the extra pass. It wasn't until I got into college where really I became elite from a shooting perspective. I was not elite in high school, but I got stronger. I got more confident. I was in a system that needed me to be that. And again, I look at, what makes a great shooter? Well, a lot of practice, the right type of practice, right? The right mechanics for me, kind of growing up that way. But if you don't have supreme confidence going into a game because you've trained at a level where you're ready now to take those shots in a game, and you don't have the supreme confidence of a coach who, if you miss 3 or 4, tells you to take the next one, or if you don't have the supreme confidence of your teammates who knows that's what your role is, and so I'm going to make the extra pass to him, or I'm going to wait off of this screen for him, or I'm going to go set the screen for him. All of those things have to come together that put me in the position that I was in. I mean, I look at kind of my 3-point stats at Huntington. I shot almost 10 threes a game for my career and made almost 4 a game for my career. My junior and senior year, I shot over 44% from 3. So the reality is I probably wasn't shooting enough. I mean, I got probably as many shots as I could get in the course of a game based on the way I was being defended. But those were the, kind of narrowing that down again, the mechanics from an early age, shooting it the right way, learning how to shoot a jump shot, and again, shooting it the right way, watching tape, understanding what you're getting in a game, what are real shots that you're getting, and then training those shots, keeping it simple. I don't have to dribble through 8 cones and do a step back 3-pointer. I mean, what am I going to truly get in a game? And those are the shots I'm going to make hundreds and hundreds, so that now I have the confidence going into the game. I've got the confidence from my coach, and I've got the confidence from my teammates. And one thing I will say that I was very strategic with, and I give my dad a lot of credit, because he would take us to Carmel High School in the mornings, 3 days a week, every week. And we would get there at 6:30, and we would shoot from 6:30 to 7:30. He would take me to Hardee's, get me breakfast, and then we'd go to school. And I would wake up and I'd be like, why are we going to shooting free throws? And why are we going to shooting? Well, the high school coach, well, funny enough, he was getting into the high school at 6:30 every morning. So from the time I was in 6th grade, he saw me in the gym 3 days a week. And then all of a sudden now, maybe he would come in and sit and talk to my dad, and he'd hear the swishing of the net when I'm, hitting 95 out of 100 free throws in 6th grade. And all of a sudden you're building confidence, right? And I remember in high school, I always stayed after practice and I would shoot. Same thing I did in college, and I would shoot, and I would find one or two teammates and I would find an assistant coach to be a rebounder, and I would rebound for them too, right? We need to get extra shots up. But if I'm a kid who can shoot well and I stay after a practice and I have a coach rebounding for me and I make 85 out of 100 threes, he's probably going to want you to shoot the ball in the game.
Early in your freshman year, we were playing Spring Arbor at home.
First game of my career, Rip's career.
Okay, you missed a couple threes. We were walking into a timeout, and you said to me, I need to pass more, something of that nature. And I looked at you and said, if you pass the ball, the next time you catch it, I'm going to step on both of your feet. You kind of chuckled. Yeah, we were walking down the timeout because Coach drew up it was one of the best things I ever saw. It was great. Coach Platt drew this thing up where you came off of me, and Coach said, you set the worst screen you've ever set in your life. Let the chaser get through, and Eberly just laced a bounce pass to you for a backdoor lay-in.
Yes. Yeah. And they were nationally ranked. Well, that's a really cool story to remember that. But one of the things that I try to tell my kids that I either coach or just my kids in general when they're playing is if you miss a couple, try to get to the line or try to get an easy one. And for whatever reason, man, that basket looks so much bigger the next time you take a three. Yeah.
The Earthlings on your team, biggest fear was you not taking another shot.
Well, I didn't know it at the time, right? So, I mean, you look at it and you're like, that all. Well, you may not remember then. Well, that was a game where I think it was tied with 5 seconds left. We had the ball sideline out of bounds in front of our bench, and coach called a timeout. I think we ran something for Brody. I ended up getting the ball, and kind of a hesitation dribble went by my guy and hit a layup at the buzzer. And the ball left my hand, and defenders were coming from every direction. And I remember I land and I'm like under the basket to the opposite side, and I look back and I see it go through the net. And then I just throw my arms up and I run right across the stands. And it was family weekend as well. That place was packed, and we beat them on that last second shot. And I mean, I'll never forget that. My first college game, for that to happen was just, and again, a nationally ranked Spring Arbor team coached by Doug Knoll. They had a guy that ended up playing in, I think, the G League for a while with the Bulls. Great team, great coached team. And that was kind of like, we're here. Huntington is on the map.
It was good for everybody involved. I remember I drove home. I went back to Greentown that evening. Half of the city of Greentown was at that game. Everybody, the Shepherd kids for real. People like watching orchestrated basketball.
Right. That's what it was.
That's why girls basketball at an all-time high as far as revenue and viewership. People like to see what the strategy is. People like to see the ball being passed. People like to see roles being played.
Right.
No matter what sport it is, when people see that kind of a team environment, viewership skyrockets.
Right.
Viewership for the NBA, it's an all-time low, all-time.
Yeah, unless it's the Warriors.
Right, exactly.
They love watching Steph play because not only is he, in my opinion, the MVP of the league every year, he makes all the right plays, all the right passes. He's a leader. They love playing with Steph Curry. His teammates love him and he loves them. I mean, it's real. Like to me, that's NBA, like the way it should look, the way it should be played. Watch the Pacers. They are so much fun to watch. And Tyrese Halliburton is he is such a leader. They interviewed him after the game. Pacers win. They go to the corner semifinal now of the in-season tournament, and they play tomorrow night. And Halliburton deflects all praise, and he talks about how he loves the city, that he's so happy for the fans, that he loves to be on the floor doing whatever he can to help the team win. I mean, it's just, it really is a breath of fresh air. The NBA is so good, right? Like these guys are so good. When you see a team, it is cool. So yeah, props to the Pacers. Love what they're doing. And the coaches, Carlisle's awesome. Well, shout out to Coach Glancy too. That's another just awesome coach and person. And we had so much fun with him. He was the perfect yin to Coach Platt's yang, and complemented each other so well. I'll never forget first practice when we're trying to figure out jersey numbers, and there was like 44 and 55. And I think I said, give me 55. And he's like, you're not wearing 55, you're a guard. And I'm like, well, what are the options? And, they had my high school number 10. So I'm like, all right, I'll wear 10 and kind of keep that going. Funny enough, now Zach Goodline at Huntington, our All-American, who came back for his 5th year, is 55. So Clancy wouldn't let me wear 55, but Coach Alford lets Zach Goodline wear 55. Oh, and I remember Coach Glancy wanted a piece of me one-on-one freshman year, and I took it to him, and that was it. He could still play. He was, physical and mean and all the fun things he would do. He absolutely did in that one-on-one battle.
And everything went down to Dairy Queen in Huntington.
Yes, it did. Well, what people don't realize, and he was so quiet about it too. I mean, he was Blackford's all-time leading scorer, Blackford High School, had a phenomenal career at Huntington. I mean, yeah, it's just like, you think about the people that were teaching us and coaching us, and it was, yeah, pretty wild.
Hey, I want to tell one story about Jeff Shepard, and it's about Jeff, but you know what? It's also about the kind of program that Coach Platt created at Huntington. We were talking about Spring Arbor. 2 years later, we're juniors, and Spring Arbor's coming to our place. And my roommate, Brody Garber, that was a lost season for him. But at that point, he had injured his foot. We weren't quite sure what was going on yet with it. And getting ready to play Spring Arbor, and they had a kid, I think he was first team All-American, maybe their conference player of the year that year as a junior, the year before as a junior. Now he's a senior, and Brody was supposed to guard him. The day before the game, we start practice, and coach says, Brody's out of commission. He's not going to be able to play. Ryan, you're going to start for him. You're going to guard this kid. And I'm telling you what, I was a nervous wreck that entire practice. I mean, I'm freaking out because my first 2 years, I'm getting mop up time, and that's it. And I'm coming in my junior year, and and I'm hoping for some playing time. I'm working hard at my game, and first game coming out of the gate, and I'm starting, and I'm trying to fill in for Brody, and I'm guarding this kid, and I get back to my room, our room, Brody in my room, and the phone rings. And it's Jeff and Matt. And all they were saying was, Rip, you can do this. We believe in you. You are primed for this moment, and I'm telling you what, I went to bed that night and I slept really well because I knew, talking about, Jeff, you talking about having teammates who believed in you as a shooter, that right there made me believe my teammates believe in me. I can do this. And that is just something that I've taken as a coach. And like I said, that's a culture thing, and that was just huge for me. And that's a story that I've told numerous times to some of the athletes that I've coached about what kind of teammates I need them to be or they need to be. So that was just amazing.
Well, I think
So
I've
cool,
got to
Rick.
add my Jeff Shepard story too.
Oh no.
No, it's good. For starters, just in general, I know Derek stepped away from it, but just seeing him here, because that's my freshman year when you guys were still both high school seniors. That's the Bethel game at home, the court storming where we upset them, and that's when they were top of the conference. And then obviously seeing you guys for 3 years again to call your games my senior year. So just the bookend of my 4 years at Huntington as a student, because I had seen Huntington basketball as a kid, growing up to what Coach Platt did with the program. But Jeff, when you came on campus and Rip, I mean, you were the same way. I mean, you guys were both so real, and welcoming and friendly. But there was one point in time where, and I don't know if it was a solo or a group performance in chapel, but Jeff, your compliment to me about something that I was doing, which I remember that moment because it's symbolic of just over 3 years, whether it was in the dining commons or in your dorm room, the times we could see Scott play from Florida State on ESPN, or getting to do the open gyms where we were allowed to come in and play around with you guys and do that stuff. Obviously not where Platt brought in the burners, but they let us come and just do that in the off season. But you all were always so real, and really that's part of what made that campus so special. And all the things that that Derek talked about, of just that atmosphere. And my senior year, when I was announcing, I got to it was the one time, because I would always travel separately. You guys were on the road ready to get, for away games way before Mike and I had to get there to call it. But because we were going to Kentucky, and I'm talking to you from Louisville, I've heard Bellarmine mentioned several times. It's right down the road from where I work. This was my first time in Kentucky to go play Georgetown and go play Transylvania. And that was the best time I got to spend with you all for that weekend, because I got to travel with the team and see what that was like. And Jeff, your brother Scott, who didn't get to see you play as much as he probably wanted because he was still in college for the good portion of it, but that year he was even accommodated to come and get on the air with me at halftime. Just won the games they were home and said, "Hey, I need somebody at halftime." We like, and I meeting your dad and everything. So just so appreciative of the times there, and just the dad, the Christian man that you become, the things that you've expressed over the years about what Huntington meant to you. And my dad loved leaving those clips for all of you. I mean, that was definitely something that he wanted to make sure that you all were connected to know. And eventually senior year, probably getting clippings that I wrote, since they decided that if I was there anyway, I might as well cover it for the Herald Press. But
yes,
it's just a lot of memories, just hearing all of this. And I don't know if you heard it, Derek, but I did reference the Bethel win. That was my freshman year when we got to storm the court on that upset. Probably one of the top wins for that. That was Coach Platt's first year, but I memories of that as well.
Those notes your dad left in our campus mailboxes were legendary. My wife is also a Huntington grad. She kept all of those. We have them in frames in the Rust Belt basement.
Well, I'll pass that on to him.
I hope you do. When your father did those things, knowing that you've got support of the faculty is a huge aspect, no matter what level of sport you're playing, whether it's middle school, high school, college. But having faculty support is a major aspect of athletics. Without faculty support, it's not the same. I'm sure Jeff and Ryan and Nate, you would all agree.
Nate, one thing, I appreciate that story. It's so cool to hear that. And I look back and I think about, I kind of had to grow up in a family where a lot of people wanted my dad's attention, and I would really be able to just kind of see him, be able to speak to people and honor people and appreciate, like, when people would want to just ask him questions, like it was never a burden.
Mhm.
And my mom was like, for her, that was everything. Like, I don't care how good you've played, how bad you've played. I care about the person that you are, how you carry yourself, how you talk to people. And I think about all of that. I look at Huntington, and you're growing up, right? Like life, you're going from a boy to a man, and you have a lot of influences and really good people around you. And I think what made it so special is that I think we all realize that people are in a way looking up to us. I mean, it's kind of a weird thing, right? It's like people are looking up to you, or they recognize that maybe you're different. Like you're kind of walking around in this posse of basketball players. And I give Coach Platt credit. I give Derek and Brandon credit. Brandon was my floor leader on my dorm. I'll never forget him telling me that, Jeff, like, this is so much bigger than basketball. You have such an opportunity here to become a man and to make this experience incredible. And so I look at that and I think we did that, right? Like we had our posse, we had our team, but I think what people recognized is that we valued people, we loved people, we understood kind of what that was, and wanted it to be where everyone could enjoy that. Like people like yourself. I mean, huge impact to be able to do the games and to write the articles and to be around us and encourage us. We needed that encouragement as much as we needed to encourage other people. And it was special. When I go back and speak to the kids, to the team at Huntington, it's one of the biggest things I talk about is like, you are on a platform. You have an opportunity to be different and to make a huge impact. You can make somebody love this school, love this basketball team because of who you are, in reaching out to people and loving people and valuing people and serving people. Unfortunately, there's so many selfish people, and it's like, I just want to give. Like, if someone wants to be a part, like, let's make our circle bigger. We can bring more people into this to enjoy this. Like, that's what, to me, that's what basketball is all about. It's going to finish line, right? But the relationships and the friendships, the more of that we could get, the better off we were all going to be. And in the end, that's what really matters. One of the main things that I love about Huntington, I'll give you just a quick story here. My daughters play for the women's soccer team, and Coach David Lewis, his big thing is, right, wins, losses, whatever, but got 4 years to prepare these women to love the Lord, serve the Lord, become, potentially amazing wives, amazing mothers, amazing, examples in the world for Christ. And so our freshmen and sophomores will never carry a bag. They will always eat first. And our seniors and our juniors are going to learn how to serve them. That's what this team is created to do, is those juniors and seniors are going to serve the freshmen and sophomores. So what better way, right, than athletics, a team environment where you learn how to serve others.
Yeah.
I mean, it's everything. Like, if I coach youth basketball, it's like, that's what it's all about.
You're exactly right, Jeff. One of my all-time favorite Steve Platt sayings, and I don't remember who asked him, but someone asked Coach Platt what his version of tough is. And without hesitation, he said, Christ hung on the cross for all of us Christians. That's tough. I was like, my goodness, that's amazing. That
gives me chills.
That is a statement that should resonate through the bones of every earthling on this planet. And that was one of the most beautiful things about Coach Platt, is Coach Platt could take any situation and boil it down to simplest brass tacks. That is a special skill set.
Well, of course, I got to see him from a different vantage point than the three of you, because he didn't have to give me the time of day, even when I was covering the team. He didn't have to. And I can remember, and you also have to understand that your senior year, or my senior, your junior year, for me to get information on the teams you were playing, There's no internet. We don't have any of these games on YouTube. I'm calling sports information directors so that they can probably they either emailed, I would imagine, but literally stat sheets. Because most of the colleges in our conference had so little information that was available online, and it sure wasn't live. But he made himself available to me so many times before the games, gracious afterwards. And of course, I had known him for a number of years at that point. So it was but still, I'm a 22-year-old kid, and just to have those chances to get a little bit behind the scenes and to see him with you all on the trip I got to participate. Those are memories that stay. I mean, it's been 25 years, guys, and it's you're right, Derek. It comes back to you like it was happening last week. And I'm glad that we all look the same too, because that's
Me too.
Clearly. Yeah.
That's all that matters.
Rick, when I was coaching, you were always the examples of my kids of, I don't care about your size. It's the will to want to get that ball, because the way you would rebound against bigger guys and just your tenacity in that always stayed with me.
That's exactly why Russell Crowe learned how to be gladiator from Ryan. I'm telling you.
For sure.
I had to find a way to get on the floor. I mean, that's really what it was.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about roles. I had to set screens. Something I never had to do in high school. I had to set screens. I had to crash the offensive rebounds. I had to play defense. I had to take charges. I had to find a way to get on the floor, because the talent around me was so great, and I always looked at a guy like Michael Edison from Bethel, watched him play, and I'm like going, okay, I see how that kid gets on the floor. And he had a lot more talent than me, but man, he was diving into bleachers, he was diving into benches, and I thought, well, okay, that's
runner-up Mr. Basketball.
Yep.
Yeah.
And his dad
is Jack.
In my estimation, I get a lot of flack. I started this Rust Belt thing from people from Maryland. Their version is Morgan Wooten. Morgan Wooten, I've got all of his videos. He's fantastic. God rest his soul. But Morgan Wooten was at Catholic school. Jack Edison at Plymouth High School is the best high school basketball coach to ever live.
Wow.
You look at his state championship teams, and
all single class, right? I mean, all the stuff he did was single class.
When they beat Evansville Bossy for the state championship, it looked like a JV team warming up on one end and a Division I team warming up on the other end.
Right.
There's
God only made one Ryan Ripke.
Absolutely.
Is this how Sarah speaks to Ryan before bed every night? Is that why he's always smiling?
I think Ryan Ripke has a lot of attributes that we don't know about, and I don't want to know. I think Sarah does know.
Well, hey, Shep, I thought it was classic. So we had practice tonight, and I knew I was going to be a little bit late because practice was going to overlap with the start of this Zoom. And Quinn comes up to me right near the end of practice, and he goes, Dad, he goes, can you rebound for me after practice? And I said, oh, Quinn, I said, I can't, I got to get home. Well, the team went out and they started shooting free throws. And I thought, wait a second, I'm getting on a Zoom with Jeff Shepard. He will appreciate me needing to rebound for my son because he wants to put up a few more shots.
Don't say no to that. There is nothing in this world that is more important than that.
That's right.
And to that story, my son yesterday, 2 nights ago, he said, Dad, I want to go to the high school and shoot in the morning because they had game day. And on game day, they don't get a lot of shots up. And I told Betty, I'm like, I could never say no to that. And yeah, we're getting up extra early and we're going in and we're getting shots up. But when your kid comes in and says, hey, can we go to the school early tomorrow to get shots up? It's like, man, you can't say no.
Yep. So,
because don't we always hope and pray that's how bad they want something in life, that they want to work that hard? So why would we as parents stand in their way? Yeah, make it happen. Well, Derek, I want to thank you too for just the opportunity to speak tonight and to share some of these stories and to reminisce with everyone here. That's been just a great blessing, a lot of fun. And I want to thank you for really setting the standard for us in college. I mean, it's amazing, just to think back to those really important times in life. And, my parents were going through a divorce. I mean, there was just a lot in my life that was going on at that time. And people like you, that were there for me on the court, off the court. I mean, it's just incredible. So I'm thankful for the opportunity and really appreciate you.
And my heart bled for you. I remember that like it was yesterday. I remember you and I having a lot of really good conversations about life.
Appreciate it so much. Yeah. Well, and a real friend when you can share your heart with people, because they're going to be there, for and support, and
And they're not going to broadcast it to other people, that it's in-house.
Yeah. All right. I got one last story and then I got to hop, but I want to share something with you guys that I think you'll appreciate. So this is my license plate, and I'll never forget getting this in the mail and thinking, my goodness, I need to find out who's got HU10, which was my number, and I need to get that number. I was at a PACE committee meeting. So PACE is the President's Advisory Council for Excellence. Dr. Emberton, I serve on that committee, and I was getting something out of my trunk before going into that meeting, and I closed my trunk, and I'm sitting right above the dining commons at Huntington, getting ready to walk in. And I see this again, and it hit me. So I wanted the number 10, but God had a really special plan for this license plate, because as I'm walking into that dining commons for our meeting, I was reminded that it was March of 1998 that I gave my life to Christ.
There you go.
And think of this license plate. Like, that was like, wow. So again, every blessing in my life is because of Huntington University. And that is just a cool story of God's continued faithfulness and showing me it's so much bigger than basketball.
Well, that's a great story. I'm glad you shared that with us. I sure appreciate you, Jeff, talking to us. You've brought back a lot of good memories. Thank you so much. And I will take you up on getting with you in Central Indiana and making a really good instructional video. Nate, God bless you, and tell your dad I said hi.
I will call him when I get off of this call. I need to talk to him anyway, so I'll pass it on.
Thank you guys so much.